A few days ago, an expat investor called me in a panic. He'd been ripped off on his off-plan property. Now he's trapped in a bad deal and he's out of funds to bankroll his investment, and his agent that he dealt with originally obviously isn't returning his calls. The sad reality is a lot of first-time and even experienced expat investors find themselves in this situation. So what should our investor have done differently? And what can you do to avoid finding yourself in the same terrible situation? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you the 5 biggest risks of investing in off-plan properties in Dubai, and how I help my clients avoid these risks before they end up losing thousands or even hundreds of thousands of pounds. Let's start off with the biggest mistake I see expat investors make. So a lot of people come into the off-plan market thinking, I'll invest in an off-plan and then maybe resell it in 12 months, rinse and repeat. Easy peasy, and I've doubled my income in 3 years. And this usually ends up being dead wrong. And they actually just end up with a property that they paid way too much for in the first place and see that they're struggling to resell. But this isn't their fault. A lot of the time, they've been sold this expectation by maybe an agent who was just interested in filling their own pockets without caring about the situation the investor finds themselves when they can't sell the property within that 12 months that was promised. And the key takeaway here is just simply this. You need to go into this kind of investment with your eyes open, with a realistic time frame in your mind. So whenever I sell my clients a form of off-plan, I tell them the same thing. Plan to exit either upon the handover when people can take out mortgages, or even 3 to 6 months after the handover when people have better understanding of this project, when it started to generate some hype in the market. People are leaving good reviews, because realistically, you'll only be able to find a very few select projects, maybe from 3 to 5% of developers, who you can actually resell before completion. But it has to be a very special one. But if you told me, Joe, I want to buy an off-plan property around Dubai Hills, well, that probably won't be ready for another 4 years. So you won't be able to resell it for at least 3.5 years. And even if you have a really good product. You see, in today's market, with such high competition rate, if it's still 2 to 3 years away from completion, you're going to struggle to sell it in the next 12 months. So be smart. Don't go into off-plan with the expectation of trying to sell it before it's ready. However, I would argue that there's only one more important thing than your timeline when you're investing in Dubai. And it's something a lot of expats get wrong, because they get so overexcited with the prospects of adding to their portfolio that they don't stop to ask themselves this simple question. What am I actually doing this for? Now, don't worry, I'm not getting philosophical on you. I'm talking about the concrete financial goals that you've set for yourself. In other words, what's more important? Short-term cash flow or turning a bigger profit in the long run? For example, let's say you're buying a studio in Business Bay where there's a lot of studios coming up. Have you thought about what you're going to do when it's ready? This type of location attracts young professionals and business people who are probably looking to settle down there long term. And properties like this, with a lot of people coming and going in that time frame, can be an amazing investment if your goal is cash flow. But the problem is, if you're trying to flip that same property, you're going to have potentially a harder time, because every man and his dog might actually be trying to flip it as well. So if you're looking for a property that you can flip, you're better off focusing on places like townhouse, villas, or waterfront communities, or even larger 2-3 bedrooms in these prime locations, not studios. These communities are a lot more attractive to people, maybe families from the UK, and obliged to pay a bit more money since they're looking for that nice place that they can stay for an extended period of time. So before you invest in any specific off-plan, make sure that it's primed for your specific financial goals. Now, so far, we've spoken about the things that are within your control when you're deciding where you want to invest. But what about the things around you that you can't control? And there are certainly risks that you won't see coming, but that doesn't mean you can't mitigate them. For example, if you're working with a less reputable developer, there's a chance they could run out of cash and the project could get delayed. But it's not all doom and gloom. The Dubai Land Department has put a bunch of laws in place to protect investors against this kind of thing. So when you purchase an off-plan property, the money is kept in an escrow account. Now, this prevents your money from actually just being able to disappear and the developer can run off with it. And that money can be recovered. But to get your compensation, you will need to get lawyers involved, and it could be a lengthy process. It's not just like, okay, here's your refund. So your best bet is to mitigate this. How are you going to do this? By working with reputable developers who have proven track records for delivering on time and at least have some experience in the market. And most importantly, make sure that you work with someone who actually cares about your investment strategy. By the way, if you want to speed up this process and you have roughly $400,000 to invest to start with, you can click the link below in the description and book a call with one of my team and get access to the pre-researched off-plan deals. Now let's look at something I would say is an attractive prospect of investing in off-plan property, and why some cases it can be just a myth. So you might have heard of the old post-handover payment plans being referred to as like an interest-free mortgage. This isn't quite the full picture, and I'm going to be brutally honest here. Let's say you're investing in a property that cost $1 million and you've got a nice easy 50-50 payment plan. So you'll pay $500,000 during the construction construction, and the remaining $500,000 can be paid off post 2 years of the project being completed. Now, at that point, you could, of course, get a tenant in who will rent and contribute towards that $500,000 still owed. Now, it is unlikely that your rental yield will be $250,000 each year post those 2 years, so you will need to contribute towards it. But either way, they are paying off and contributing. But here's the thing that they don't tell you about. What you'll find, I would say a lot of the time with these post-handover payment plans, when you look at the price per square foot of these projects, that developers will charge 10, 20, or even 30% more for post-handover payment plans. So your $1 million property now suddenly costs you $1.2, $1.3 million. So yes, there is no interest on paper, but they've built that potential interest into this price. Now, not all developers do this, but obviously a lot of them do, because they're waiting for their money. And like I said, it's not exactly a bad thing. I mean, after all, you are getting an extended payment plan. And if you don't have the funds readily available, and maybe you can't qualify for a mortgage, then this is definitely the best option for you. But just make sure you ask your agent whether or not this is the case, and then don't make a decision without seeing the full picture, because what you don't want to do is pay way too much for it. And speaking of the full picture, when you start shopping for an off-plan investment, developers will often present you with like a sleek, modern visual of the finished product. And that's what you're buying into after all. CGI images and a concept. But we've seen firsthand during visits to certain areas of maybe Dubai land or Dubai South, for example, how sharply these showcased visions can be contrasted with the reality. Some of these areas are surrounded with ugly, rundown, 10, 20-year-old buildings. And these buildings, they might get a new lick of paint, but it's unlikely that they're going to knock them down and renovate them. So when a developer shows you these beautiful mock-ups and the amazing surroundings, sometimes it's just an idealized picture. But that's why me and my team are here always visiting these locations, and we actually send our clients videos of the location so they can see what they're getting into. But even when they've done all their homework, I still see expat investors make mistakes simply because they just don't know the market. Now, this can lead to potentially millions of dollars in losses if they aren't making the right decisions, which is hard to recover from. So watch this next video where you can learn which properties in Dubai you should absolutely avoid.